Okay, Hunter Lisle, welcome to Danceology. Thank you so much for giving me your time. We're going to get straight to it. So, my first question is I know you had many professions before you became a dance studio owner. So, very briefly, tell me about the most interesting ones.
Wow. So my life has been a series of stories. I've been a magician. I worked with a lot of TV things with magic along the way. I did dancing, of course. I mean, I've been very blessed to be a spokesperson, TV, all kinds of radio, all kinds of crazy things. Probably the most crazy thing is that one time in Lexington, I was getting out of a straitjacket. So I was doing a straitjacket escape upside down from a crane in Lexington, Kentucky when I was a kid. So that's probably one of the funniest stories. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've walked on fire, I've eaten fire, worked with Tony Robbins along the way, a lot of different people. And then I ended up back in Lexington teaching dancing and opening an Arthur Murray studio, oh gosh, 24 years ago.
So, tell me, being a magician and a dancer, uh, what do they have in common? Have you learned, have you been using any of the skills that you learn as a magician? Are you
Yeah,
like
when you're
charming your clients to come to your studio?
I do like the fact that when you're a magician, you're always performing. And it's really fun because you're trying to entertain the audience. You're not about fooling them, you're really about entertaining them. And when you're teaching dancing, there's an element to that because you're trying to help someone and you're helping them where they are, but it's got to be fun. It's got to be easy. It's got to be where they can reach out and they can learn to dance. And even at a high level, even judging and things like that, you've got to have a good time and enjoy it. So I would say that magic kind of gave me the ability to connect to people and to be able to just be entertaining, I guess. Although if I were normal, the world would be boring. So, definitely not normal.
So tell me about this dance studio idea. Have you worked in a dance studio before you opened your own?
I did. I was working in Cincinnati, Ohio for about 9 years, and I was really fortunate because I got to manage three different schools when I was there. If you can imagine working 2 days in one school, 2 days in another, and 2 days in another, and did that for several years. And then I was able to travel for Arthur Murray and did some consulting with different studios. So I got to travel around and not only just coach, but I got to actually see what was working and what was not. So when I came back to Lexington, we really came back to a market that was really dormant. There was nothing here. In fact, it even had some bad things that had happened. So it was like starting from scratch, literally. And my goal was to hit the ground running. And we had 25 new students coming in before I even opened the doors the very first week, actually.
How come? How did you get these 25 people to come to your studio before you even open it?
Well, that was a crazy story. So I decided if I was going to do it, I didn't want to have a small studio. I wanted to be in a big one because I get bored easily, and I like to be with people. And as you can probably tell, I move around a lot. So I don't sit still very well. So anyway, I wanted to be busy, and I started advertising and working with people in the community about 6 months before I actually opened the studio. And I had a staff at the time of about 4 people who had never danced. And I said, we can teach you to teach. If you're a good teacher, you'll become a good dancer. If you're a good dancer, you may or may not become a good teacher. So I was literally looking for people that could teach and be connecting to other people. And we trained them from scratch. And back then, I lived in this little apartment. And again, we borrowed the money to start the studio. I lived in a very small apartment, and I convinced the clubhouse to give me their clubhouse. I still don't know how they did this. They gave me the key to the clubhouse, and they said, okay, you can train your staff in there when we're building the studio. So we would take the staff, and we would be, contractors working during the day to build a studio. This is before the internet was, where it is now. So, resources were different. And we got the staff excited, we got them motivated, and we worked till midnight training how to teach, how to do something. And then we went in. And so I started interviewing people. And the first week out, we had booked people very close together. We were like, okay, 7 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock. So when you walked in the studio, it looked busy. But the cool thing was, most of that was our staff. So they were on the floor having a ball, and we were all having a good time, and the students walk in and say, wow, it looks so busy. And I'm thinking, yes, it is. But they didn't know that was our employees as well. So then we started off, and then it got busy because people liked it. They had fun. They stuck with it. I remember our first wedding couple that we ever taught, their last name was Phillips. And we were still building the studio. I had a boom box, if you can imagine the old boom boxes, and I had a halogen light that I'd ran a cable to and I had plugged in a credit card machine, and I ran this all the way through the studio because the front part was all being constructed. So we went in this back room and we taught them to dance for their wedding, and it was a lot of fun. And that was one of our very first students. And then our first single student that ever came in was a school teacher, and she is still with us 24 years later taking lessons.
Wow. Well, listen, I wanted to ask you about some of your teachers because I've been to your studio and I met them. And do you still work with any of your original teachers?
Do you know, until last year, I had one of my first teachers ever retire last year after 24 years. And she was a very amazing lady here in Lexington, one of the first Zumba teachers in Kentucky, actually. And her name was Katya. And she literally was from Peru. She started from scratch, had never danced when she first started, and then taught for me for many years. And then her kids were grown, things happened in her life. It was time to retire. So last year she did, but she was with me all those years and taught lessons and had a great time. Some of our teachers now have been with us for 20 years plus, 22. You've been to our studios. I mean, they've been 10 years, 15, 20. We're very lucky and very unusual that our turnover rate is really small. I mean, maybe 1 or 2%, if that, which is rare, as you know, in this industry. So to
Yes.
be there that long. So I guess, but if you treat people well, in theory, they stay with you. And we've always believed, we change lives one step at a time. And that's not just for the students, but that's for the employees as well.
So I wanted to talk to you. Most of the time, I interview the dancers, but I wanted to talk to you because I wanted to find out about the business side of this industry. And so far, you have given me some very interesting insight. Like, you got to be entertaining. Teaching dancing is like entertainment. You were very proactive. You actually started teaching and training people before you opened your studio. So you
Yes.
were well ready when your doors open. Um, Tell me about some of the other aspects of that are needed to make the studio successful, like location. I feel like location is tremendously important.
It really is. There's a dance studio is an ecosystem of a lot of factors and a lot of pieces that come together, as you know. And a lot of times studios, they don't survive, and so, to be 10 years or 15 or 20 or more takes a lot of different things. And you're right, it's a lot of pieces at once. So location is a big part of it. You want to have a location that's friendly, when I say friendly, it's easy to get to. If you try to find someplace and you can't get there, I always marvel. There's a couple places in Lexington that have never survived, not just like a dance business, but everything that goes in that building goes away. And I've always been fascinated by that because either there's no way to get in or there's no way to get out. So you have to have plenty of parking. You have to make it easy, accessible. You've got to have a location that people can get to. And when they come up, they've got to feel welcome. They've got to feel like they can be there. So location is a big part of it. Location, advertising, personnel. There's a lot of factors. There's only two things you have to have in the dance business, and that is students or teachers. And you either have one or more of each one. So, location was the first thing we looked for. There was a guy that used to have a clothing store that was popular here in Lexington. And the owner passed away several years ago, but he called me every day to try to get me in this facility. What made this facility interesting was that Arthur Murray had been in this facility in 1950 and 1960. And it was one of the older studios actually in the country, much smaller location, but it was in the back side of the building. So we decided to go to the front side and rebuild it, and we doubled the space. So that was one of the first things. So that started the thing, finding a location. Advertising is a whole other topic. And as we can talk about that as much as you want, that was a big thing. That's an art by itself. And we do a lot of that. We've done seminars on that for TED Talks. I've done some for Zoom for training for Arthur Murray's Worldwide and other groups as well. And advertising is a whole different dimension now than it was even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, and with AI and things like that. So that's probably a long-winded answer. So you can tell me to stop anytime, and we'll
Okay.
be here.
Well, you know what? Let's go back to the location in a different sense. Maybe you call it a market, because not like a physical location where the studio is, but
Yes.
the market in California where I live is completely different, and the clients here will be completely different than the clients in your studio in Kentucky. What role does it play? And also, I would like you to tell our viewers about Arthur Murray, because you keep saying that name. Not everybody knows. It's the oldest franchise of dance studios in America. I think the most popular.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
absolutely.
what they are. So
Absolutely.
tell me about that, and tell me about the markets, and what are some of the more popular markets, because quite frankly, in my area, I don't see many Arthur Murray studios.
Arthur Murray is a really good company. I've been fortunate to have been with them now since I was 12 years old because my mom started taking dancing lessons with my stepfather. I started teaching at 15, so I've been with them my whole life. I've been blessed to be outside of it too, in the sense that I'm a judge for the world. Both open competitions and Arthur Murray. But Arthur Murray really does a good job when they go into a market. You're so to go back to the beginning of your question. You're looking at different markets. When I traveled, and for a couple of years, I got to go to almost every city, and I saw different markets, and I saw the people were different in each one. And I think you've got to find where those people are and how to reach them. So, for example, if you have an Arthur Murray studio or a Starbucks, for example, or a different coffee shop or a different dance studio, they're all different. But there's one commonality in that they are servicing a client. So, when you look at a market, you're going, how many people are in the market? How many other businesses that are like you are in that market? How friendly is it? I used to go into Starbucks when they were all over the country, and I would say, okay, what does it feel like? If I went into California and I went to a Starbucks, how does that feel versus Chicago versus Atlanta? Or I'd go into a Cleveland market, it was cold. And I said, what does it feel like there? So I think you go into a different place and you reach a different person. Kentucky was very friendly. When I was in Cincinnati, even only an hour and a half away, it was still a different market. It was a little more northern, I guess, a little bit less, more business-like. And then Arthur Murray is the oldest one. The oldest dance studio, 1912 is when they started. And it's the second
Mm.
oldest franchise in America, actually. And they've run continuously all those years. They are the biggest. What they do, though, is they help people. So you can't just like go into an Arthur Murray and start from scratch. You've got to be a part of the system. So they raise you in the system. So you're a teacher, you're a executive, a supervisor, a counselor, a manager, a franchisee. There's no limit, there's no ceiling. So it's one of the few businesses where you can start from scratch and go as far as you want to go. But you're right. When I went to California several times, it is a different market. It's a different feel. And I remember one time I was judging out there, and someone said, "Okay, you're too friendly. You're too nice." And I started laughing. I was like, "Okay, I'm just what I am. What you see is what you get." And but this is the way I am all the time. So, but they didn't know what that was about because they're like, "Okay, what is your agenda?" And I'm like, "I don't have one." So every market is a little bit different that way.
Do you think you could open a successful studio anywhere in the country?
Absolutely. And one thing I do that I learned is that when you open a business, particularly a service business, it's about the people. If you have an operator, an owner that is successful in one market, chances are good they're going to be able to go anywhere and open somewhere differently because they know what it takes to be successful. Just like you see some businesses come along and they open and they're, for all intents, they should be really successful, and then they close and you're like, what happened? But it's usually the perspective of the owner and of the managers, of the employees. It's a belief in what's possible. One thing I've learned in my life is that the impossible just takes a little longer. So, again, you can set a dream, you can set a goal. And like I said, we set a goal to be the biggest in the world. And everybody told me that was impossible. The market at the time had 200,000 people, metro. And I'm like, they said that cannot happen. Within 6 months, we were the fastest growing studio in the world. And literally, with about thousands of people being taught. And I think that's a mindset. So something you were asking me, could you be anywhere and be successful? Yes, if you have the right mindset. But you've got to believe in your dream and you've got to believe in your goal, and then you got to make it happen. And I think that's a big part of it. People get into lack thinking and what I call scarcity thinking, where they think, well, that if I do this, it's going to hurt somebody else or it's going to take away from them. And the truth of it is, it's abundance. There's enough for all of us. So if
You
you really
think?
work hard, yeah, I do think.
But here's the thing. I think that in places like Marin, where
Yes,
I live in the Bay Area. First of all, there is the friendliness aspect. I'm not
yes,
saying that people are not friendly here,
yeah,
but I also think that there's so much competition out here.
there
There's
is.
so many other, not even other dance studios, but other things to do.
Yes.
That for people to come to a dance studio, it would be, I feel like you will have to work a lot harder to find these people. Uh, Go ahead.
Sorry, there was a lag there. You do have to work hard to get them. But the one thing I've learned, wherever you go, the most friendly place wins. Because if you're friendly and people want to be with you, like when you came to Lexington, it was such a joy because your personality came through right away. So we liked you right off the bat. We'd met you went way, way back, but I didn't really know you. And then when you came in, your friendliness, your warmth won me over like that. And I remember it was late night at the airport picking you up, and I was like, oh, she's so sweet. And I remember telling my wife, I was like, hey, she's really wonderful. So if you go take that and just extrapolate it, if you go into a market and you've got 5 competitors within 5 minutes away, What do they have to offer? Yes, it's always about the dancing, and you've got great dance potential, but you can train great dancing. But when you walk in the door, where is that magic moment? Do you remember the old TV show Cheers? Back there was on
Sure.
TV several years ago.
I
Well,
danced
remember
for
the
the
friend?
guys. I danced for the mailman from Cheers. I
Yeah,
danced
but,
for
oh, no
the
way! I forgot about that. That's right. Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. Well, it's the friendliest
and
place.
he
It's
was
a
not
place.
that cheerful, actually.
Oh no, that's not good. That's not good.
No, I love John. I love John, but John was very different than his character in the show. So just a
Really.
little remark.
So not as friendly as yeah, we've met well over the years working with a lot of celebrities. It's like some are like what you see and some are not. But it is a place in the show where everybody knows your name and everybody's always glad you came. And I think
Mhm.
that's a big thing. We had a lady came in this week that was from somewhere else and she had been to multiple studios. And when she came in the door, she kind of was wary because she'd had a bad experience. And so we got done talking and she decided to take lessons. And so this is her second week. When she came in yesterday, she gives me this big hug and she's like, "Hey, I'm having a ball. This is so different than what I experienced before." And I said, "That's what I wanted to hear." Because she said, and it was not negative toward the other place, but she was like, "The atmosphere is different. The feeling is different." Now, you can create a feeling anywhere. You can create a feeling by a smile, by warmth. When you walked off that plane and we gave each other a hug, and it was like, "Hey, I feel like I knew you for 10 years." That's something that's a skill
So
set.
you think that that atmosphere and the feeling is what really makes the studio successful, and it's essential in in a studio for it to thrive. So let's switch the subject for a minute. You have to be a good dancer to be a dance studio owner.
Yes. You really do. You have to go through the ranks. To own a franchise, you have to be certified to a certain level. I was a bit of a, what's the word, OCD overachiever. So I became a judge at around 22 years old and then started doing all my certifications, all my licenses, my judging for the world, and then just kept doing that. But you have to love it too. But you do have to become a good dancer. You have to be able to show your product. You can't get away from that part of it as well. I mean, it's great to teach, but you also have to be able to perform. You have to be able to demonstrate successfully what you're trying to convey. And if you can't do that, then you either have to find people that can, or you've got to be able to help someone. So yeah, there is that part. You have to be a good dancer. I mean, I guess that goes without saying when I think about that. But that is a big part of it. So if you're a champion dancer, that's one level. If you're a good dancer, quality social dancer, there was one city that I visited. They had a studio, and the studio invited me to come consult, but they weren't doing very well. They had a party one Friday night, and it was very formal. It was very much like this, and everybody was dressed up, and it was not accessible. Now the dancers were lovely. I mean, again, I judged a few of them for in standard and for international standard, and they were beautiful dancers. They were champions, but they were trying to make everybody like them without the in between. And so when
Mhm.
I told the owner of the studio, I said, "I want you to try a test. I want you to have a party that's a little more dressed down, it's a little more fun, and just see what happens." And they did it for about a month, and their attendance tripled actually. And it was really fun because they were good dancers. And so, but then they became friendly people as well as good dancers.
They were a
Hopefully,
little bit too good. They were a little bit too good. So
yes,
listen,
yes.
why do you think some of the obviously there are plenty of amazing dancers that are good teachers, but there are also plenty of amazing dancers that are not good teachers. Why is that?
I see that a lot. One of the things that happens in our industry, and it's really hard to avoid, is when you're teaching, you have a lot of power because you feel like I'm doing this and I'm giving knowledge. And you have to realize the student is there because they want to be, not because they have to be. And so they want to be in that studio to help to learn for whatever their benefit is, whether it be dancing, being together as a couple, being a single person, you get to meet people. There's a lot of reasons. So you have a lot of teachers that become really great dancers, but they're trying to convey that, or they're trying to lecture, and they go, "Okay, I'm lecturing this," and the student is sitting there like this, and at first they're engaged, and then they start to pull back, and they go, and then when you see that sigh, you're like, "Okay, you've lost them." And those students usually go, they'll not tell you that they're not happy because nobody wants to offend somebody else.
It's
They'll just
just
say,
you.
yeah, it's not you, it's me, and they'll tell you I'm busy sometimes. So you
Mhm.
see that a lot in our industry, and I think the higher level teacher you become, the more dangerous this is because when it doesn't happen in the first year or two, but from 5 years to 20, usually when you're teaching, it just happens. You're out on the floor and you're teaching 40 lessons a week or 50, and you're having a great time, and your students are listening to you. and sometimes you forget where they are. So you have to kind of be humble and go back to that a little bit. And I think there's a lot of ways to do that, but just reminding yourself sometimes too. I remember one of the first times I judged something and I thought I was really all that. I had won a competition and I thought I was the best dancer in the world and I thought I was fantastic. And then I got invited to go judge and I thought I was even better. And then when I got there, I saw these great dancers that were way better than me. And it was very disappointing. It was very, it bruised my ego quite a bit, actually, to be honest. I was not happy. I was upset. And eventually I learned what it was and, kept going.
You know what? I actually wanted to ask you about that because I know that you judge, and we'll go back to the dance studio subject in a minute. But you do judge, and I wanted to ask you. Uh, I've been judged by people that I know were not as good of dancers as me. What does it take to be a good judge, qualified judge? And is it all right for someone, in your opinion, who has never dance perhaps as good as some of the dancers out there to actually judge them?
Boy, this is a hot topic. So this is a big topic right now. And again, I've been blessed to be with Arthur Murray in DCA, World Dance Council, et cetera, for many years. So I think you have to have there's a point where you have to compete or you have to be on the floor to experience what that is. Because what happens is when you're taking lessons to dance for competition, you are taking lessons. So you're taking information in, and that also helps. And then you have to get out there and do something. So I think there's two parts. I think there's certification and there's dancing, and they do go hand in hand because I think that you have to have a little bit of both. I think you can become a good judge through knowledge and through all the certifications and all the tests, but there is a point where you have to get on the floor and you have to be able to discern what you're looking at. Because let's say you have a quarterfinal. Quarterfinal means, for those who don't know, you've got, like, let's say you've got 24 couples and you're trying to get that down to a semifinal of 12 couples. We use the skating system, obviously, to judge. And you've got, let's say, anywhere from 5 to 11 judges on a panel, odd number, so hopefully there's no ties. But let's say that you're watching and you've got a minute and a half to pick out 12 couples from 24, just to be simplistic. And you've got to have an eye for that. You've got to know what you're watching for.
Yeah.
And you hope and you pray that you get to see someone enough to give an accurate assessment and that the total panel of judges has a consensus. So I do think that, to answer your question, you have to have both. I think you should be a dancer, and I think you should have competed at some point. I was just lucky. I got to compete when I was young, and I got to do a lot of that, and it was just a lot of fun. So I was able to win at a young age a little bit and get out there, and then did my certifications too. But I do think that's a part. I've seen some judges where they only do certification and they judge, and they can become a good judge because if you do it enough, you're going to develop a sense for it. Or they just compete, but they're not certified. So that also poses a problem because they've been dancing, but maybe they haven't watched other people. What you hope is that they get help, that somebody actually comes along and mentors them, or they work with someone. And you've seen that too. Like you said, when you're out there competing and someone's judging you, and they're not as good as you, that's a challenge because how do you respect that? And you just hope that they have the knowledge to watch you and they want to look at you objectively. And I think that's one of the questions I get asked the most is, how do you ever look at someone objectively? And then the truth of it is, you can't help it because when you're watching all these people, you only have a split second to make a decision. And you really are watching what happens at that moment in that space and time. So what happened 2 hours ago doesn't matter, or 2 hours from now, it's right now. And what I see you do on that floor might change in 10 minutes because you might do another dance and do better, but whatever I'm watching, I'm judging you in that moment.
Well, I'll tell you this. I think you probably would be a much more objective judge than a lot of other judges out there just because you don't work with the couples, with a lot of I'm talking about, the top level,
Yeah.
amateur, professional, the championship level couples. I talk about it a lot on this podcast because I think it's so bizarre that these couples are judged by the people that teach them. And
Yes.
obviously, you need to have a personal connection with your students. And it's a human thing that you're going to favor them over the couples that you don't teach. So that's a conflict. And I think in that regard, because your studio is social and you work with social couples, I think you would be much more objective. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where the level of the people you were judging was beyond you, where you looked at that final or whatever, a quarterfinal, and you were just overwhelmed with the quality? Honestly, Right now, I don't know the finals. I don't know the people. I used to know names, and the thing is that I think it happens in every discipline, like gymnastics and uh, ice skating,
Hmm.
where there is a bit of a pecking order.
Yeah.
So a newcomer, let's say, would have to work their way up, but you know who is supposed to be first, second, third, and the
Hmm.
the spacing might change a little bit, but it will be around there. And it's the same with ballroom dancing. You pretty much know the final approximately, and there might be few changes here and there, but it's pretty consistent. Now, I have been out of that business for a long time, and I looked at the, like, amateur final, and to be honest with you, exactly, you have only a minute and a half. I could pick a
Right.
winner. I
Yes.
could pick a winner, but the order of all the other couples, I would not be able to do it with a clear conscience in my heart that I'm doing a good job in that
Hmm.
minute and a half or 2 minutes. I
Yeah.
would be basically guessing. How can you assess someone's quality, or not even someone's, five couples quality in 1 minute? How do you do that? Have you ever been in a situation when you felt like I am just, it's a lottery at this point?
I have. It was funny back when I was in Ohio, and this is in the early '90s. I had a couple that I coached all the way to to really championship level in the United States, and they were interesting because I found myself one time judging them, and this isn't early on. This is way back in the '90s, and I was really tough because I mean, if you define it, judging is an objective process of a subjective experience because you can't help human nature. And like you say, when you see those names, you recognize the names, you recognize that certain things, and it's really hard to be objective and not look at them and go, okay, I know, because like you said, you can almost look at 1,000 couples and know who's going to be in the final sometimes because you know what they're done, and I've done that too where I've gotten overwhelmed in a final because like the semifinal, you still had some variance, but you get to the final and they're all phenomenal. I mean, they're
Yeah.
phenomenal dancers. And what I find for me, personally, the most difficult part is I could always pick number one and two like that because I can see it clearly. I can see the image of it, and it's three, four, five, and six that I really have to think about. And sometimes I have to reword or remark it because I'm like, okay, I picked them, but then I saw something else that piqued it. But when I know the people in there, or I've had them come in the studio, or I've done something with them, it is really hard because you're looking at
Mhm.
them and you recognize them. You can't help but have an affinity, a feeling for them, like, oh, look where they are, look what they're doing, and you want to mark them. And I think every judge that's been around for any length of time has had to deal with that and continues to deal with that. I think some judges, they might get jaded sometimes because it's easier to just pick the people It's easier to pick people that you've worked with because it's as a judge, you're on your feet, you're out there.
Mhm.
But I think we have a moral responsibility if we can. And I say this with all humbleness because I found myself in the same position where you try to be objective as much as you can, and you just hope that a consensus of judges as a group can come to the right answer. But I did that once. Like I said, in the '90s, I had a couple that was phenomenal, and I trained them up to that level. And then I found myself judging, and I didn't know they were going to do the comp. And I was like, oh my gosh, there they are. And it was really hard not to look at them and just want to mark them because I saw them doing great. And the outcome of that was many years ago. But yeah, I found myself in that position, and since then I judged one about 5 years ago. It was actually the Emerald Ball, and I was judging that, and there was a couple that I really liked. They had come in the studio to judge for me, actually, to do an event. And I watched them dance. I actually did a coaching lesson with them, and I was like, wow, they're really good, and they made it to a final. And I'm out there on the floor, and I'm like, gosh, and it was really tough because there was something that they were not in the top placement because of what they did at that moment, but I really wanted to mark them because I knew what they were capable of and I knew where they
Yeah.
should be. And it was I remember sweating over it thinking, okay, did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing where I marked them at the end? And it all worked out. But yeah, that's a really tough position for judges to be in. And I think in this country, we've grown judges. When I started way back with Arthur Marine NDCA, there were hardly any. Now there's a lot, but you have to really be aware of that. And if you're going to take on the responsibility of judging, I think you have to take on the ethical responsibility too, or at least be willing to accept that, to go, okay, I'm going to do my best. And nobody's perfect. I mean, you're going to make mistakes. We all do. And you can't help that sometimes.
How do you how do we fix that problem? What
Wow.
would have to be done to
Boy,
eliminate?
so how do we
I
fix it?
actually have a couple of ideas, but
Tell me
I
your
want to
tell
hear
me
if
your
you
idea
have any.
first, and then I'll tell you mine.
Well, my ideas would be very bad for business because the business of ballroom dancing is to bring as many couples to your competition as possible, and that's
Yes,
why you pack sometimes 20 couples on the floor at the same time and you judge them.
yes,
Well, the only way I think to make it fair is to qualify dancers to perform in the competition. So you first have to qualify. Um, that system can be worked out either through certain amount of competitions or do like a smaller qualifying competitions. And basically, the final of the final would be, the top 5 or 10 couples, but they would have to dance like in ice skating on
right.
the floor, alone, solo, so people can actually see their dance and not be thorn between looking at them for 5 seconds and looking at another couple and looking at another couple. I think that would be the only thing that could fix it and would give people actually a chance to judge couples fairly. And
Yes,
also, the couples in the finals, they would not be allowed to take lessons with the teachers for, maybe not for life, but at least within the last year or so.
right. That's a really
But it would
great.
be terrible for business because
Yeah.
competitions
Well,
would be so small.
I think it's a great idea though, because like one of the things that we did in Murray's a few years ago is when they got to a certain level of the competition, it was compulsory for them to do a solo or a group, depending on the volume of people, with the basics. And I found that to be really interesting to judge because you had couples that were working on choreography and doing their rounds and doing their, for the competition. So you see these rounds and they're all prepared and they look amazing and they look like doing a choreography, doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Then you see them do the basics out there, and they actually have to lead, they have to follow, they have to actually do the dance. And boy, that's a whole different experience. I remember watching one couple that was phenomenal, and then they got to the basics, and I was really disappointed because I was like, wow, they really can't dance very well. So that's a horrible thing to say. So I'm probably going to get a lot of flack from saying this live on a podcast. But I agree. It's like you want to see someone out there, and if you could do that and watch them by themselves, you would get a real sense of what they could do. Like I said, it'd be hard for the business because where would you put everybody? And
Yeah,
I mean, where would you
exactly.
fit them all in? You'd have a competition. It might be 2 weeks. They're literally like, okay, we're going to slot everybody in. As competitions have gotten bigger, that becomes even more of a problem. But what a great qualifying thing that would be, like you said, like ice skating. Early on in the actually it was the late 1991 actually. I judged a couple ice skaters and I trained them actually for ice dancing for the Olympics, and it was really interesting because they were here in Lexington, and it was right before I moved out of the city, and it was really fun because I didn't know a lot about ice dancing at that point. I didn't know a lot about ice skating, and I found myself in the position of teaching really high level ice skaters, and it was really, they taught me how to ice skate too, but it was a lot of fun actually. But they were so talented. It was a different process than the ballroom world, and I thought, if you could combine that a little more, it would be kind of cool.
I do believe so, and I know a couple of ballroom dancers that worked with ice skaters, and I think it became quite popular recently for ice skaters
Mhm.
to train with ballroom dancers because I think very often in ice skating, a lot of amazing ice skaters are very skilled technically, and sometimes they're lacking that artistic expression, and that's what dancing brings to brings to ice skating. So, can you reveal some of the names of the people that you worked with? Well, I'm asking mostly for my producer Todd, who is
Yeah,
a huge fan not only of dancing but also ice skating, and he has a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure he'll be thrilled to.
there was
Um,
one couple, and I'm trying, now we're talking ancient history. It's like,
I
let's
know.
say 1990, 1991, maybe. There was a couple names, their first names were Ann and Jeff, and they were, gosh, I'm going to draw a blank. I'm so much better with faces than I am names. I'm really, we're talking when you came to Lexington. I never forget a face, but names are hard. But they did take lessons, and it was really fun because when they came in, I mean, again, I knew very little about ice skating. I knew about the skating system because of judging and all that, but
I don't think they came to you to work on on the technique of
no,
ice skating. I think
no,
they
I
came
worked
to
for them
you
on presentation, and I worked with
presentation
them on
for the
being able to connect to the audience and being able to
audience,
take what they
right?
knew on the ice and translating it to
Expressing
fluidity,
it. Mhm.
yes, and movements and styling, things like that. Yeah.
So listen, because right, we don't have that much time left. What is the hardest thing about running a dance studio?
The hardest thing is every day keeping a fresh perspective because it's really easy to get jaded because you're running a business and you have everything happening at once. And when people see you run a business, they think, okay, you've got all this money and you got all this time. And as you know, when you run a business, it's rarely either one. Usually you're running in 15 places at once and everybody else gets paid first. So you're always trying to figure out, how do I help someone? And I think for me, it's like keeping a fresh perspective because you're trying to help someone. And I'll tell you what, honestly, what's helped me over the years is I always try to go back to, and I don't do this always well. I try to do it as well as I can, but you go back to what is a new student going to feel, and that is always exciting to me. When you talk to a new student, so I think as an owner of a dance business, especially, you should keep your hand in that a little bit, that you should always talk to the new students a little bit, some, at least in some form, because it's very motivating. When they walk in the door, I mean, that can re-energize you. I mean, yesterday I had a guy who came in. He's a young person. He was a minister, really great guy. He's so nervous and so excited. So I worked with him a little bit, and then I talked to another couple who's been dancing 10 years, and the differences were really something. But I was
Yeah.
honestly very motivated by that new student. So I think is running a business. That's what keeps you motivated. I mean, you got to focus on the goals and those things, of course, all the things that it takes to run it. But I think that does motivate you. It makes the pressure a little less because you get to focus on someone else. And when you take, it's like a charity, like you can't.
All right. So last question. You mentioned advertising. What kind of advertising have you find most successful or most?
Boy, it's a loaded question. The
Mhm.
advertising that is the most successful is the advertising that works. Yeah. So what I mean,
Which form
what I
works
mean,
best? Yeah.
yeah. So I'm slightly teasing, being facetious, but we live in a world where you can't just pinpoint one source. Where 20 years ago, you could run an ad in a paper, you could run an ad in a magazine, and you might get 10 phone calls, and someone says, "Hey, I saw you there." But we're bombarded by so many sources right now at all times that I think for any business, you have to be a lot of places. So I think the answer is you can't just be one place. You've got to, we do print, we do radio, I do a lot of TV. We were one of the first studios that did TV because I put myself out there. And whether I was silly or not, I ended up doing ABC, over 500 episodes with ABC. And it was like, and I was not trained at the time when I first did it. I was like, okay, let me learn this. And I did have some mentors, but I put myself out there. I couldn't be afraid to fall because, and I'm going to look silly. I mean, if you can't laugh at yourself, somebody else will. It's like I'm famous for bad jokes too, as those of you who know me know that. But anyway, so I think you have to advertise in a lot of places. I think you have to put social media on the forefront now because in whatever form that might take for you, but you have to be everywhere because I think when people are looking for something, they're triggered by, okay, I heard the ad here, I saw it here. I remember one of our students one time came in and they were laughing. They said, well, we woke up this morning, we turned on TV and there you were. We turned on the radio in our car and there's your
And there
voice.
you were
We
again.
opened the magazine, there I was again. And they said we couldn't get away from you. And I was like, well, that's good. And then we were laughing about it. But later I was like, well, that's kind of the key is that, okay, well, when the top of the mind awareness, and then there's both branding and there's a call to action. Branding is saying, okay, I know you're there. Call to action is, okay, I know you're there and I want to call you or I want to go there. So we make it very easily accessible through, we branded a name, we branded a phone number, you can call or text our studio 24/7 and reach someone. And that's really important. You're not talking to a machine. You're not, there's a way to do that. And that's a kind of important. So I think accessibility, and to answer your question, I can't say that there's really one source that's better than the other. I think that you have to be everywhere pretty much.
And do you believe in spending money for advertising, or the impression that I have gotten more from where I went to visit your studio and your wonderful event, by the way, was
Thank
that
you.
you are more of a grassroots. So you would go on TV, but obviously you have to pay for radio advertising. Social media is free unless you are advertising. You actually pay for it, but it can be free. So,
Right.
how do you feel about investing in advertising?
I believe you have to because
Yeah,
I think you absolutely have to. And I learned this early on, and that was actually from Arthur Murray because they did a great job kind of teaching us that back in the day. And they're like, you have to spend money to make money, and you have to be able to advertise to make it happen. And you can't just assume it's going to come to you. And I think a lot of studios, when they first start, they put a lot of effort and a lot of money into certain things, but then they open the doors and they just expect people to come flooding in. And that rarely happens. So
Of
you have
course.
to really work hard to get that to happen. Even the charity event like you came to, I mean, gosh, the amount of public service announcements, PSAs, and the media part of that, it's humongous. I mean, we spend 5 months of the year getting ready just for that one event. And, and again, we've been very blessed. That event's raised almost $2 million for the charity. But again, we're so lucky to have you here this year, by the way. We had one of your friends and one of mine, Anya Trubinskaya, who's been here for many years. And it's like, and she, we all connected and we've gotten to meet some really good people through the years. We've had some great people from Dancing with the Stars, a lot actually, that have come to Lexington. But that took some work. And so, in building those relationships and the advertising. So yes, to answer your question shortly, I do believe you have to advertise and I do believe you have to spend money. Doesn't mean it's easy though, because you make a dollar and you want to do something with it, and you got to pay rent or payroll or taxes and things like that, and you've still got to do that. So I do believe in that.
Is there a specific percentage of your revenue that you dedicate to advertising?
I think to be super successful, and this is not a number that's hard and fast because I think it differs
Mhm.
in each stage of the business, whether you're starting it from scratch or you're
Right.
5 years in or 10 or 20. But, for a ballpark, 10 to 20%. I mean, it's a pretty good number, and I think at some point you can change that, but you also have to look at, are you getting the results or not?
Right.
Don't be afraid to change. There's a couple ads that I've done that, I like, but if
It doesn't really
like we were,
work.
but they don't work. Yeah. And you have to really be kind of educate yourself, where I used to read, I don't know if you, I have my office, I've got books galore. So and I've been lucky. I worked back in the day. I got to work with Zig Ziglar personally. I got to work with Tony Robbins. I got to work with people that were very motivating and, personally. And I learned a lot about, and there's a guy named Jay Abrams who did a lot of marketing for the world, with top companies in the world. And I got to work with some of these people, and it's like, I learned a lot because when I go to work with them, I just say, teach me. I'm an open book, and I was like, okay. And sometimes they would tell me things that were great. And sometimes I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. But yeah, that's how you do it. You got to advertise and you got to reach out and try to help people.
Well, I'll tell you this. I've been watching you for a little bit when I was in your studio. I think you are a marketing wizard. Your studio is incredibly successful. I've been there whole day, and it was packed from noon until late evening. I believe your studio has the biggest volume of lessons in the country or in the world out of all the Arthur Murray studios. Huge congratulations to you. We do have to wrap up. So before we finish,
Okay.
please let me know, our viewers, where can they find you? Um, is there anything you would like to share or advertise right now?
Yes, I would
That would
love
be,
to, of course.
that would be
If
a
you're
good one.
looking, you're such a good friend. If you're looking for dance lessons, don't be afraid. If you're looking for dance lessons, or you're a single person and you want to meet people, or you're a couple and you want to spend time together, call now or text now, 859-278-7711. It's
Old
Arthur Murray Dancing
school.
of Lexington, or go to dancingiseasy.com. We're rebuilding our website soon, so if it had a little construction, but it's going to be dancingiseasy.com. And we've been having that for many years, but you can learn to dance. Don't be afraid. If you want us on social media, Facebook is Lexington Arthur Murray. We're on Instagram as well. I am Hunter Lisle on there. Funny story is, on my Instagram, it's I am Hunter Lisle. The reason that happened is when we first did it, there was another Hunter Lisle, and that person was very quiet, very normal, not like me. And they reached out to me and they said, "We got a gig for TV, and we're not you." And I said, "No, I don't think we're." So I got to meet that person actually, and that's how it ended up being I am Hunter Lisle. But if you look on there, it's Arthur Murray Lexington. Just go to the social media, go to the website. Dancing is easy. Call us, text us. Again, 859-278-7711, and you can learn to dance and have some fun. But don't be afraid. Give it a try. Summer's here. Fall's coming. You want to get ready. You want to get in shape. I mean, and look like Edita. So there you go.
Oh gosh, you were so sweet, Hunter. Thank you so much. I wish you lots of success coming in upcoming years. Your studio is absolutely fantastic, and it has been a pleasure to talk to you.
It really is. I thank you for our friendship and getting to know you and having you here. And again, thank you for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.